We woke up at around 5 a.m. and packed our backpacks. We drove about 20 minutes to the beach and arrived at the parking lot a little after 5:45. The sun had not come up yet and we weren't legally allowed to park there until 6, so we sat in the car while we ate our peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that contained just under 4 grams of penis envy mushrooms, which is quite a potent strain, so we knew we were in for quite an intense trip. Once it reached 6 a.m., we walked roughly 1 mile until we reached the beach. We chose this beach because it was fairly quiet, and we started our trip before sunrise to ensure we would not run into or be around any people while we were tripping. Once we reached the sand, we found a spot beneath a few logs to hide our shoes and socks, and something I was really looking forward to on this trip was being barefoot the whole time and feeling my feet on the sand. The coastline of this beach was miles long, and we decided to go left when we entered the beach. We walked for a couple miles along the coastline as the effects of the mushrooms kicked in more. We slowly began to feel waves of primal energy wash over our bodies, and I knew quickly that this trip would be an intense one. After nearly an hour of walking, we hiked up a dune to take a rest and eat some fruit. At this point, I was feeling the effects of the mushrooms pretty heavily, and I felt so overwhelmed by the nausea that I could not enjoy the view. I lay down and closed my eyes, and immediately upon closing my eyes, 3 feminine entities wearing dresses side by side rushed up in the foreground of my vision as my eyelids were closed and held a hand up. I didn't know how to interpret this vision at first, but I thought at the time it might be a warning sign that this trip would get too intense for my liking and I should turn back or something. And that kind of made me so overwhelmed by the nausea, and at that point it seemed to even kick up in intensity for a few moments, that I actually wanted to throw up, which would hopefully get some of the mushrooms out of my system and thus make the trip less intense. One of my friends was feeling the mushrooms quite intensely as well. He even later said in that moment he wished it would have been over, but I intuitively knew that I did not want to do this and I wanted to experience, what the mushrooms had to offer for me in that moment. I was still feeling the nausea. I wrote the word nausea in the sand and I began to play around with the lettering of the word, and I took the first 3 letters of the word, N-A-U, and I moved them to the back, and that ended up spelling out see now. And as soon as I saw the word see now and said it out loud, something switched in me. I saw the C right there. See now. No, it means see now. And as soon as I told myself to see now, a threshold seemed to be reached and I entered into increasingly non-dual awareness. I remember playing with a pebble in my fingers, completely conscious that the pebble was me and that I was the universe moving myself. So we descended down the dune shortly after that, and we walked back the way we came. At this point, we were nearly 2 or so hours into the trip and were beginning to peak. We walked right next to the water with the constant sound of the waves breaking along the shore. The consistency of the sound was quite meditative and peaceful, and all 3 of us at this point seemed to drop most of our worries that we had during the come-up. At one point, I pulled up my jeans to my knee and I waded in the water. It was so cold and crisp, but also felt so amazing at the same time, like I belonged in that water almost. And as I stood ankle deep in the water, I marveled at the sheer beauty of the ocean. The words "return to ocean" kept coming to me, and I knew as I began to peak on these mushrooms, I was doing exactly that. I was leaving my separate self, and I was entering into the ocean of oneness, and this giant ocean in front of me, with the waves breaking along the shore, was a representation of that oneness. I turned around and looked at my 2 friends. I could hardly remember their names, and we started saying random names of people that we knew, but they just made no sense to us. They had no meaning, and we were beyond the concept of names and identity at this point. We kept walking further back the way we came. We passed by a few people at this time, and at that point the anxiety increased a little bit because we did not want to be around people in this state of mind. So at this point we found a quiet dune where we entered the beach, close to where we entered the beach, to just sit down and relax. At this point, we were maybe 3.5 or so hours into the trip, and we were really at the peak of the peak at this point. And as soon as I sat down on the dune and saw the view, my entire being just went into a state of pure awe and marvel. Oh my God, I kept repeating. Wow, holy shit, I can't believe it. It was the most beautiful view I've seen in my life, truly. Miles of coastline and dunes with waves upon waves breaking along the shore. Morro Rock and the neighboring town were also far in the distance, going in and out of view as fog would occasionally block it. It was jaw-droppingly beautiful, and the best part of it was, I was that beauty. The beauty was just penetrating my being to the point of complete ego dissolution. There was no separation between me and that beauty. I was it. I am that beautiful, and you too are that beautiful. I wish for every human to realize this, to realize that they are infinitely beautiful. That when they look out at a beautiful view in nature, wherever they are, mountains, beach, wherever they are, when they see just that jaw-droppingly beautiful view, that's them finding the beauty in themselves. It's a profound realization to realize that you are that beauty, and there's truly no separation between that beautiful, amazing view and yourself. And it really doesn't make much sense, to a normal, in your ego state of mind, but in that moment just felt so profound that we were that beauty and we were that beautiful. It was so healing. And my friends were feeling something very similar. One of my friends was literally brought to tears in that moment, saying he had never felt this beautiful in his life, and he had never felt so himself before. Seeing him in tears almost brought me to tears. And it was both my friends' first trip of this intensity, and for them to have something positive out of that experience, to have something so beautiful move them so deeply, is just so satisfying to me. It makes me all the more confident that these substances can really bring about great change in this world. And it also all the more confirmed for me that I want to help people and or be a guide in some way to help them heal and become better versions of themselves, in a way through these substances. And as I was sitting there, I remember the distinct experience of feeling so feminine. At that point, I closed my eyes and I felt the energies of life just dancing through me, through my whole body. I was so open and receptive and attuned to everything that was running through me. There was the beauty, reality folding and bending every which way, opening and closing, yin and yang, masculine and feminine. And once those first slivers of duality began to return, it almost felt like the universe and I were having sex. And in this energetic exchange, I was the feminine part. And at that point, just waves upon waves of realizations were just washing over me. Insight after insight just penetrating into my being. So many insights that I can't even really remember most of them. And all that there was for me to do in that moment was to just take it in. Just take it in. And I'm sure I definitely have forgotten most of what I went through in that moment, because that's just the nature of psychedelic trips. You can't retain everything. But one of the core realizations I had was that there is nothing to do in life but to be yourself. This is a beautiful life we're living in. The earth is just fucking beautiful. Life is fucking beautiful. This planet is going through a time of immense and rapid change. Your life is so important, and why not spend the short life of being a human being truly and fully you? And this is a lot more complex than it sounds. This involves committing to radical honesty at all times, adhering to your deepest truth at all times. This involves developing a strong connection with your intuition, letting what has ever run through you without blockages. Do the necessary work to remove your blockages. Be you. And it just might sound off the tongue like a cliche, but I think it's really so profound. And I think I'll probably make an entire separate video elaborating further on the profundity of just being yourself, because it's actually a lot scarier and much more difficult than it sounds. But anyway, we walked back the mile inland to the parking lot as we were on the come down. When we got back to the car, I wasn't quite good enough to drive yet, so we sat on the side of the trail for about an hour just in complete and total silence, contemplating what on earth just happened on this insane trip. There was so much to remember, so much to integrate. I feel like I'm really only talking about 10-15% of what really happened on that trip, because you can't talk about most of what happens on a psychedelic trip. You can just talk about the really main and core takeaways that you have, but really so much happens. But eventually I was good enough to drive and we went home, and I just relaxed the rest of the day. And even though it is nearly a week later, I still find myself in the afterglow of that experience. I feel so good about life. I feel so beautiful. I feel more me, and I feel much more happier about the coming year than I was before, because it's my last year of college. I'm losing kind of passion and interest in my classes, but I got 1 year left, and I'm going to stick it out, and I'm just going to be open and attuned, and whatever this year has to bring, then I'm going to live through it, and I'm going to make it the best year it can be. The trip was exactly what I needed, but at the same time, I feel that I don't need to take any psychedelics for a long time. In fact, another really core insight that I had was just about my relationship to psychedelics and spiritual highs in general, and that I have a tendency to look to the future or to big spiritual highs such as a psychedelic trip for healing and insight, but really, that should not be happening, and I should be staying in the present and being open and in the flow of life. I can be where I need to be at all times, which is the present moment, and it's in the present moment that really, that's the fountain of healing and insight. All in all, it was a moving trip. I hope you enjoyed hearing about it. I want to note again that I really do not condone or advocate the use of these substances. I'm just simply sharing my experience, and if you are to do this substance or a similar substance yourself, you must be careful and do your research on the proper protocols, because it most definitely can have adverse effects. It can hurt you in many ways. But anyways, guys, that's it for this video. Check out my Patreon in the description if you'd like to help support me through my path in life. Give me a little extra financial support would go a long way in making my dreams come true. And as always, guys, have a great day and peace.